When I first thought about starting this channel, I knew exactly what I wanted it to be about. But I wasn't entirely sure where to begin. There are plenty of YouTubers who create fantastic content about old Hollywood, best actresses, music and movies, and so on and so forth, and I'm sure that that's what you're here for. The stories and anecdotes and movie suggestions, and I promise you, it's all coming. But one thing that I felt was missing was the story of how it all began. I decided I couldn't talk about this studio, or this one, blah blah, or any of the actors, filmmakers, or awards ceremonies until I had first talked about how it all started. And I want to do that for two reasons. The first is that the people behind the rise of the industry are profoundly interesting people, and their lives, although they were generally, let's call it a mess, are entertaining and inspiring to learn about. The second reason is that a lot of the content I plan to create will benefit from the audience having this backstory. Disclaimer, for the sake of this video not being a billion hours long and because it's not entirely relevant for the purposes of this channel right now, I will not be discussing the history of international film and will be condensing stories and skipping over some facts, only keeping in what matters to give you a superficial understanding of the topic. Part 1. A Curious Disruptor. Like many inventions, the motion picture camera, or the kinetograph, is one which was improved upon over many, many years throughout the 1800s before finally landing in Thomas Edison's lab, where his inventors took a crack at it, and after trials, experiments, and collaborations with other inventors, Edison, of course, got credit and a patent for the kinetograph as well as the kinetoscope in 1891. And after being convinced to buy the rights to a state-of-the-art projector, Edison began marketing the invention as his own. Literally advertising it under his name. It's beyond belief. Thomas Edison was, not the best person, but I digress. Early motion pictures were one shot and had no narrative plots. They were primarily concerned with showing movement, literally showing people walking around or a train arriving at a station. It's actually fascinating to see the earliest surviving moving picture. The earliest pictures were also usually shot and exhibited by the same people, who would show their content in a single market. As the novelty began to wear off, the industry realized the need for separate entities, one that would create and the other that would distribute, or more accurately, show said content in one location temporarily and then move to show it elsewhere, usually vaudeville theaters, fairgrounds, circuses, etc. This gave exhibitors a large amount of control over the creative content because it was up to them to put together an entertaining program for their audiences. In essence, they were the first directors and editors of motion pictures. Motion pictures began maturing into narrative shorts produced mostly by small but powerful companies including Edison's on the East Coast. The problem was they monopolized the industry with patents and therefore called the shots creatively. They were the ones to decide that actors shouldn't be named so they don't become stars. They were the ones to decide what stories should be told, and they were the ones to decide how long a picture should be. This prompted the exodus of filmmakers to the other side of the country, creating a new mecca for the next generations. Part 2. The Birth of an Industry. Two of the very first people to take the leap were Cecil B. DeMille and D.W. Griffith, who ended up creating two pioneering pictures, The Squaw Man and Birth of a Nation respectively. Both films are, problematic to say the least. I mean, this is all I will say for The Squaw Man. Birth of a Nation was a little more sophisticated. Richard Brody of The New Yorker wrote, "The worst thing about Birth of a Nation is how good it is. The merits of its grand and enduring aesthetic make it impossible to ignore, and despite its disgusting content, also make it hard not to love." Roger Ebert said that watching it was like watching the birth of an art. Which, okay, yes, but also, it is so racist. I'd watch them just to get to know my history and to place where we are today in context. After all, that was only 100 years ago. But remember, they're a problem. Cecil B. DeMille and D.W. Griffith were important filmmakers who took a risk and others followed. But their courage was only courage by proxy. Sure, they had taken a risk by deciding to go out to the other end of the country, where there's sunshine all year round and open spaces to shoot their pictures. But really, if anything happened, they could just come home. After all, DeMille had come from a good artistic family and had been a quasi-successful stage actor, and Griffith was already directing pictures for the Biograph Company on the East Coast. Part 3. Who made the studios run?
What's the best book written about Hollywood? Has there ever been one that told it as it is?
I think Bud Schulberg's.
What Makes Sammy Run?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the best book to describe what those incredible men that we worked for, that seemed to us so inartistic and so lacking in knowledge of the art part of making a movie, that they had something. And they had something, you don't know what it was. It was a kind of a magic, gambling, intuitive thing. That has gone.
Although Sammy Glick wasn't a real person, the inimitable Bette Davis is onto something here. Okay, hear me out. Am I saying that all of the men who ran the big studios were backstabbing and terrible? No. I'm not here to call people out on being awful. And the fact that that's what people take away from this book is frankly unfortunate. The similarities, at least the ones I'm concerned with, between Sammy and the studio executives of the early days of Hollywood have more to do with determination and perseverance. They were resolute and resourceful. There was nothing standing in their way that couldn't be torn down, and because of their backgrounds, they were all gamblers with nothing to lose. Every single one of them had a story of going from poor immigrant to powerful industry pioneer. Almost all of them had fled systematic anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe, and with the expulsion of Jews from the Russian Empire and the US easing immigration restrictions, many landed on the east coast of the United States. Of course, talking about each one separately would need at least a dozen videos, but a great example of determination and a good representation of what they were actually like is Sam Goldwyn, who started the company with Jesse Lasky and DeMille, which would go on to produce The Squaw Man. His biography by A. Scott Berg is honestly fascinating. It's worth a read. Sam Goldwyn was born in Warsaw, Poland in 1879, and as a teenager walked 500 miles and crossed a river to smuggle himself out of the Russian Empire and make his way to America without a job or any knowledge of the English language, which, to be honest, wasn't so terrible because it gave us Goldwynisms such as "include me out" and moments like this.
Since we're talking about Miss Lee, I always like to talk about her anyway. She played the Southern Belle in 2 pictures she was in. And that was, what was the name of the first play that she gave that great performance, and she won that was a picture Selznick did with her.
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind something.
And she won an Oscar.
I could watch this on loop. After arriving in the US and working for a glove maker, he worked his way up to sales manager before being bitten by the motion picture bug. You could pretty much find this same story with almost every other studio executive from the early days of Hollywood. Whether they moved with their families like Louis B. Mayer, Marcus Lowe, the Warner Brothers, William Fox, or David Sarnoff, or moved alone like Adolph Zukor, Carl Laemmle, Joe Schenck, or Sam Goldwyn, they all had a story of starting from the bottom and falling in love with the theater and making their whole lives about film, working their way up from mostly menial jobs to owning and operating Nickelodeons before starting the studios we love. Part 4. The Dream Factories. Owning movie theaters proved lucrative for some of them. But like Miss Davis said, those men had something. She didn't know what it was, and she thought they seemed lacking in understanding of the art part of making movies, but the truth is that those men had the exact opposite of that. They had a longing to create. Ever since they saw their first vaudeville show, or their first screening of a moving picture, they longed to be a part of the industry. People who are moved in that way usually are moved to create, not just exhibit. And that's exactly what they did. By the late 1920s, the Big Five studios were making pictures screened at theaters owned or partly owned by them. It was a perfect full circle era. The industry finally had the resources, freedom, and a brand spanking new contract system to create everything from escapist fantasies to war propaganda and all the classical fiction they could come up with. MGM was founded when Marcus Lowe acquired Metro Pictures and Louis B. Mayer Pictures, both founded by L.B. Mayer and others, as well as Goldwyn Pictures, founded by Sam Goldwyn. MGM was the biggest studio of Hollywood's golden age, most recognizable by its mascot, Leo the Lion, and its roster of stars like Joan Crawford, Greta Garbo, Norma Shearer, Spencer Tracy, Clark Gable, or more stars than there are in the heavens, as they were known. Of course, many stars switched studios over the course of their careers, but that's a longer conversation. They also produced some of the most highly regarded movies we still think of today, like The Wizard of Oz and all of the Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney pictures. RKO was founded by David Sarnoff after merging Keith Albee Orpheum and Joe Kennedy's Film Booking Offices of America. Right at the top with MGM, RKO's stars included Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, and had box office hits like Citizen Kane and a slew of musicals. Warner Brothers was founded by, you guessed it, the Warner Brothers, and housed stars such as Errol Flynn, Bette Davis, Lauren Bacall, Humphrey Bogart, and Olivia de Havilland, and made recognizable pictures like Casablanca and Mildred Pierce. I know, Joan Crawford was with MGM, but she left. Be Kind Rewind has a great video about this, which I'll link below. Paramount was founded again by merging Adolph Zucker's company with that of Jesse Lasky and Goldwyn and DeMills, and buying out William Wadsworth Hodgkinson. Zucker designed his logo with 22 stars around it because that was the initial number of actors he put under contract. They included Gloria Swanson, Clara Bow, Rudolph Valentino, and Marlene Dietrich, who, as you'll get to see, is one of my favorites. I do encourage you to watch Blue Angel. Their biggest hits included Sunset Boulevard, and that is all I need to say about Paramount. I have so much to say about this movie, so wait for a Sunset Boulevard video. And finally, Fox was founded by William Fox, who had borrowed heavily to acquire a sound-on-film technology and ended up losing his company to a merger with 20th Century, founded by Daryl Zanuck and Joe Schenck, creating 20th Century Fox. The biggest stars at Fox were Marilyn Monroe, Shirley Temple, Tyrone Power, and Henry Fonda. The Grapes of Wrath and The King and I are examples of their pictures. This is a good place for me to leave you, with just enough information for you to have a good foundation and not enough for me to be satisfied, but otherwise we'll be here all year. Please like and subscribe so I have some motivation to keep making these videos because they're a lot of work.